Okay, so welcome back to everybody. We remember that in the Damanhur.online platform, you can also achieve all the other meetings we did in the past, in the last year. We arrived to the 11th, I think, 11 meetings in every month. And this night we have to talk about spirituality. It's a very interesting topic, very vast, very big topic. Tonight we are with Manta and Tigrilla.
Con voi.
Manta will be our the host of our meeting, and maybe Tigrilla, would you like to spend some words about you, who you are, what are you doing? You have a very interesting work.
So hello, convoy everyone. My name is Tigre Gardenia. I am a nature-inspired mentor, a certified life coach, and mostly I'm known because I'm the world ambassador, a world ambassador for plant advocacy. So my specialization is plant intelligence, plant neurobiology, critical plant studies, plant humanities. There's so many, plant anthropology. It's so amazing how this field has just grown over the years. And so I basically help creatives and multi-potentialites and nature-inspired professionals to develop their true nature. And that's just like the headlines. Like that's the way, if I was to sit here and try to give you my whole background, which I'm sure we're going to get into in this conversation, it would take a while. But I've been a Damanhur for the last, oh my goodness, when I think about it, it's been 13 years that I have been a Damanhurian and an initiate. I am also an instructor of the School of Method Action and of the Damanhur Academy. And I am extremely excited to be here with you.
Well,
thank you, Tigrilla.
Tigrilla, a joke. Plenty aspects.
I like it. That's great.
Plenty aspects.
Plenty.
Okay. So thank you very much, Tigrilla, to be with us tonight. I asked Tigrilla to be with us because I think you can also enrich this topic with maybe many other perspectives, also about your research about the plant world, because maybe we can go straight into the topic. When we talk about spirituality in Damanhur, we are talking about everything. We are talking about an idea of to connect everything, to have a connection, so not to divide aspect between, I don't know, spirituality and physics and religion and so on, but to find a way to connect everything. So first of all, Manta disappeared.
Oh, I'm here. I was just leaving you the stage.
You tried to escape.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's it. Tried to disappear.
Hiding, reappearing.
Yeah, I think that Manta has some question for us.
Yes, we, as usual, received some question on our channels and on the Damanhur community in the meantime. And so the first one is the basic one, probably. So it's what does it mean for you to be spiritual, follow a spiritual path, and living a spiritual life?
Who wants to start? Nyamo, do you want to start? You want me to
Tigrilla,
start?
I'm a gentleman, please.
So I thought a lot about this question when I first heard it, because I think that spirituality is one of those words that we take for granted. I think we hear it so much that we, at some point, forget to even give it a context or a definition. So, and so when you go back and you think about what is spirituality, and spirituality really is about living a life in awareness and in connection with the human spirit, you could say the human soul. I think for us, we would also say with connection and awareness of the divine ecosystem. So it's kind of like that connection that goes from us all the way out, and from out from the primeval divinity all the way back down to the individual and all the connections that we do. And for me, that's always been the core of spirituality. My spirituality has always been a quest to, first of all, understand who I am at my most expansive self, senses, personalities, the structure of my soul, my physical as well as my subtle connections and abilities, my aura levels, or subtle bodies, all these different pieces. But more importantly than that, and especially now after all these years of working with the plants, it's also about those, what I call a spiritual ecosystem. Like, how is it that I fit into that spiritual ecosystem? What is my soul here to do? And what is this particular life give me the ability to do as part of my overall soul mission? And how does that soul mission fit into a greater mission for humanity? Or, and so for me, spirituality and being it and doing it are all the same thing, because it's whatever is, how do I stay connected? How do I increase my awareness? And how do I contribute actively or consciously to this mission that my soul has chosen for, my lifetimes inside of this greater game of life? And that's always, even before Damanhur gave me the vocabulary to understand it, as well as Kabbalah, because as a Kabbalist for many years before arriving at Damanhur, these two have spiritual physics and Kabbalah for me are mesh in together. But I feel like that's really what spirituality is. It's that greater understanding of my human soul's path within this overall bigger piece.
Yes.
Good, thank you, Tigrila. And what about you, Nyomo?
Yes, I completely agree with the description of Tigrila about the huge and vast content of spirituality. Of course, I think that everyone can also describe, can also translate it in a different way. But I also want to add something about the sort of Damanhurian habits to express spirituality. Something that for me, I joined Damanhur, I was very young, I was 18 years old. And when I started to be a Damanhurian, what I discovered was an approach to put spirituality into very practical aspect also. So to maybe I'm not talking about what is spirituality, but how to interpret spirituality. Finding a way, so Damanhur spent a lot of energy to find a way to understand how to put in practice spirituality in order to, in some way, to conquer with our divine spark, to conquer the matter, to conquer the reality with the divine, with the divine element, to enlighten the matter with our actions, with our continuity. For example, in Damanhur, we put a lot of attention about not only to act, but also to be constant over time in what we do, in order to be able to change the reality. We know, I think that every one of us in our life, we discovered, we tested that to change something, we have to be constant. It's not something we can do as something we do on the weekend. We've chosen to express spirituality every day. It means that we also have to find a way to touch with the spirituality also our work, the food, I don't know, everything, money, economy, health, love, sex, everything. Not only something that we can express, I don't know, in a temple or in a church, but something we can express every day in every daily life experience. It's not easy. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Sometimes we forget. I forget. But this is the challenge, I think, of Damanhur, to try to connect together spirituality with daily life.
And in this sense, taking your words as an inspiration, another question that we receive: what is a spiritual path, and especially if it's so deeply connected to all your life or your daily life?
Yes.
Yeah, and
please.
go. Well, and I think that this is one of those places where probably Nyomo and I will differ in a good way, like to show the diversity of actually Damanhurians, because
Yes.
Nyomo, as he said, was very young when he arrived in Damanhur, so his path has been very much colored by Damanhurian principles, and then all the extensive studies and research that he's gone into here. So you have this breadth that is like this depth, excuse me, that goes through. Where my spiritual path has been marked by breadth. You know, I have been an initiate of other paths in the past. I have taught Kabbalah and practical spirituality and sacred geometry and all these different aspects. And now even the work that I do with the plants for me is very spiritual, even though it seems like it brings in science and spirituality, similar in that aspect to Nyomo with all of his work with the physics and the quantum physics and the spiritual physics, to bringing in all these aspects. So I think your spiritual path is not so much what you do, it's how you do it. It's bringing in that awareness that allows us to, as we say in Damanhur, divinitize matter, right? When I elevate what I'm doing and I give it a connotation that is beyond just my own self, and that I look at it as, how does this move not just my own life forward, but humanity forward? So I think for some, it's going to be the same path you always do. But for others, like you followed this one specific path and it has kind of different nuances, but it's that general path. And for some, they're going to jump from one path to, it's going to look like you're jumping to one path to another. But it's about, like Nyomo said, where's the continuity? Where is the growth? Is it an evolutive path? Is it a path that you feel like you're constantly growing in and moving, and that your awareness is always going farther and farther from the I to the out? And so I think that really is one of the telltales, important aspects of what a spiritual path is are the elements for you to move towards greater awareness and greater understanding of who you are and what your place is and the impact that you're making, and all of these different pieces that move towards that divinization of matter, even though it could look very different from the outside in different ways. I don't know, Nyomo, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, though.
Yeah, maybe, first of all, I totally agree with Tigrila that we came from two very different perspectives, because I started to enjoy also other visions after my my school in Damanhur. So my first experience for maybe 10, 15 years was a deep study into the Damanhurian philosophy. And after that, I started also to touch other aspects, but it was another kind of approach. And I think that the only aspect I can add on this picture that we are painting together is that in the Damanhurian path, we try to bring together the individual path, so an individual growth, with also paying attention that the entire spirituality can grow together. So in some way, maybe we will laugh. It's a way to take the best of communisms and capitalisms, bringing to a third way where we can bring together me and us, but taking care about my free will, of course, but also taking care about the community, so the species. We believe in Damanhur that the human species have to jump to a new level, where maybe we will be not anymore the kind of species we are today, something more evoluted, and we hope also something more connected with the other intelligences, like, for example, the plant world and so on, where we can remember again that we are part of larger ecosystem. So maybe this is the other aspect I want to add to our discussion. So the us of the Damanhurian spiritual path. So in the Damanhurian School of Medit Action, we try to put together the group. So in the same time is a group. Every group is a group of spiritual path, but every one of us is a person that is following his own path inside the group, like an organism.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you. And in the meantime, I remind all our friends online that they can make questions on the channels. So please be as interactive as possible with us.
We love questions.
Yeah, and one of
Questions good.
Yeah, one of that. It's a little bit personal and is about you. And if you remember the beginning of your spiritual journey, and what has been the trigger, what has been the question that placed you into this path?
Neil, I'm going to let you start with this one.
Okay, so I remember very well the very first moment in my life when I started to give me a question about who am I and what is my position, what is my my position into the picture. I was very young. I was into an hospital. If I remember well, I was 6 or 7 years old for maybe I don't know in English for my tonsil for my throat, and I was looking at the sky. The window was open. It was summer, and looking at the sky, I understood that I was very small into a very small planet, and I felt I was alone, completely alone. And from that moment on, I started to search for other people with the same effort to reconnect together all that stars, all that story. For that moment on, started to be a need for me. And was very difficult to describe that need to other people. I was not talking about that because they were not understanding what I was talking about until I joined Damanhur, and I found many persons that they were completely understanding my need and they were searching for the same target. So I consider myself I'm a lucky man because I was very young when I found people with the same mission, with the same target, with the same ideas. And after 35 years, I can say that it was a very right choice. That's my personal experience. But I remember very, very well that night a feeling of sadness and loneliness. Searching for something. I have to do something with other person, but I don't know where. I don't know how. So, in one word, if I have to summarize my first trigger about my spiritual path, it was research.
That makes sense. And it's so funny how we all come about it in different ways. I feel like my spiritual path has been kind of when we do the course on rebirths, on programming your rebirths, I feel like it's been layers of rebirths within the same lifetime. Like I was very lucky to have grown up in a location where my mother was and is still to a certain extent, even though I have a feeling we're going to get into my mother at some point when we talk about religion. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. But my mother, when I was young, was a seeker in a very casual way. So my mother had studied pretty much everything. Like she had worked in a Jewish school. I had gone to a Catholic school. My mother studied metaphysics. And while she didn't include me in the sense of like me participating, other than when I went to a Catholic school for a while, and I went to a Christian school before that, a Baptist Christian school before that. But other than that piece, there was just this base of curiosity and of the ability to see multiple levels. Like I remember my mother would go to get her cards read, and she would accompany her friends to specific events, and she would tell me stories. But my mother wasn't interested necessarily in being on a spiritual path so much. Manta, you might want to shut your microphone off, because when your hands touch. And so so that created a base of the ability for, like you said, inquiry, like searching and being a seeker in some aspect. And yet I went down the kind of more magic path. Like I was looking at Wicca and esoteric magic and things of that nature always attracted me. The occult attracted me much more, where she was more on the metaphysics realm. We never really talked about it until way later, when I was when I was initiated into another school. And there I came home, and one day I was having a conversation with her about it, and we got into a very deep, I hadn't really understood just how deep her exploration had been. But it was fantastic to know that you could search in whatever way worked for you. And she was very honest about the choices she had made and the why. So for me, I guess I always had certain rituals were always done in my culture, certain types of spiritual practices, from Santeria to, like I said, Catholicism and Christian religions to metaphysical spiritual paths, were always just there. They were around. And it made me feel like I could always look at things from a physical realm, but also from a non-physical realm. I think it became much more concrete for me when I was lucky enough. I always have very weird stories, guys. I have weird stories. That's just who I am. My life is filled with very strange stories. But I actually I worked in high tech. I worked at Microsoft. And right before I worked at Microsoft, I was working for another tech company, and I started to act and sing and dance, because I come from a music background and a music engineering background. And I got cast in a show that happened to be something called a prayerformance. So it was a performance in the middle of a intentional dance party with a very esoteric theme. And I was cast in this performance that allowed me to meet this entire group of people who were part of this mystery school. And the whole concept of an initiatic path all of a sudden unveiled itself in front of me. And it was funny, because my first teacher on that path is now, after many years, I was just recently featured on a Gaia original series called Divine Science. And she's actually on the show too, on my same episode. And so it's really fun that my first Kabbalah and initiatic teacher, the person who initiated me into that other path, we had become good friends, and then we sort of lost touch as our lives went in different directions. And now we are both on the same show and sharing stories. She's a physicist, and so sharing stories of like our different but yet united paths. So I think it's really about, for me, it was about always having this curiosity and this deep, deep, deep feeling that there was more than just what I was seeing physically, and always feeling very comfortable within myself that this occult, esoteric realm existed. And it was just going to unfold. Like, I don't know how I can explain it other than to just say, I knew that the steps to unfold it, like I didn't have to push it. I knew that as I became more ready, that typical, the typical meme of when you're ready, the teacher will reveal themselves. Like, that was me. It was just like, I kind of knew that there was all these avenues I could pursue, and that I could just trust that the next step I would take me on my right stead of my path. And so it really wasn't a single, this started it, but more of all these different pieces building one upon another and giving me the space to go that path. I can say this, I did spend a few years where I didn't do anything. Like, I wasn't connected to any real spiritual path. I think that's when I got curious about Kabbalah and I started reading about it, but I didn't have a teacher and I didn't really know anything. And it was, emotionally speaking, probably the most difficult period of my life, not because anything was happening, but because I could feel that void. And at the time I didn't know that what it was. It wasn't until the teachers finally revealed themselves that all of a sudden all the pieces came together and I could like understand that this was my path and that I could, and it's always been like that. You know, that school showed up, then other things took me to another country, then Damanhur showed up, and I never thought I would be living here, even after the first visit. But it was like
I met
inevitable.
you the first day. I met you the first day you arrived in Damanhur.
I remember we had dinner together.
We had dinner together.
Mm-hmm. So it was. I thought I was only, just so you all know that life is weird and has these, you know, takes twists and turns. I was supposed to only be here 6 months, and then I was supposed to go back to my regular life.
Yeah,
6 months. That was 13 years ago. Yeah, 6 months, and I was like, I'm done. I'm going to finish this project. I'm out. 13 years later, I am still sitting here.
And Tigrila, you mentioned many different spiritual schools and many paths and the religion too. So one of the questions that we receive is, what is for you the difference between a spiritual path and religion?
Yeah, here I have to say I rely heavily on my Kabbalistic side to give me a really deep understanding of that, because if anybody has ever studied Kabbalah or has ever seen the Tree of Life, right? The Tree of Life is made up of a whole series of sephiras with 3 pillars. You can see kind of 3 columns, the 3 pillars. One of them is the pillar of philosophy. The other one is the pillar of religion. And then you have this middle pillar. For me, the middle pillar is the spiritual, for me, my way of the spiritual path, which means I step in. So the pillar of religion is about, as my mother puts it, because as I was talking about my mother at some point in her life chose a religion. My mother is a Baptist. She is a beautiful Baptist. I love talking about religion with my mother because she's extremely, she does her own studies. Like she comes to her own conclusions, but it's within the framework. And she says it very clearly. I chose to go from metaphysics and all of these other philosophies that I had studied, and I chose a religion because I needed very direct rules. I needed to know that I would do this step and I would get to heaven. She couldn't handle the choose your own adventure that is a spiritual path. So to me, spirituality is kind of the weaving in and out between philosophy, which is the concepts, the ideas, and the religion, which is the steps, the structure. And you see this in the Tree of Life. You see this through, you know, the differences between Netzach and Hod, and in Hesed and Gebura. You see, and in Chokmah and Bina, you see the path of severity, not in a bad way, but more in this is your structure that you should stay within. And philosophy, which says there is no structure, follow your emotions, follow your experiences. And to me, the spiritual path is the path that weaves it. And that's why we call it like the middle pillar, because you do have some structure. You know, whatever it is that you study, whether it's, you know, here in Damanhur and you have your initiatic path with our rituality and our alchemy and all these pieces that has structures, but it also has a lot of philosophical elements that allow us to choose how to apply some of those structures, or which one of those are more adept for me. Like for me, it's really plant focused and personalities focused and certain things. For Nyomo, it's very, you know, spiritual physics and quantum physics and all of these other pieces. We have a shared rituality, which is our kind of part that comes from that religious, the pillar of religion, or the pillar of severity. And we have this philosophical side that comes, and so we can weave through them. And I feel like that's really the difference. That's what distinguishes. Religion says, I'm going to tell you what to think, what to feel, not feel, you feel yourself, but I'm going to tell you what to think and how to approach that. I'm going to give you everything you need to get there. I'm going to provide you that structure. I'm going to show you the words that you're supposed to get to. So it provides all of that in a way that yes, you have a little bit of wiggle room, but you generally follow that, where spirituality is pulls from different aspects.
I think interesting point, especially about structure rules that in a word of follow the flow are interesting elements to think about. So what about you, Nyomo?
Beautiful, the division about the division of Tigrila that come from the Kabbalah vision. Kabbalah, it's a beautiful, aspect. Maybe something I can add with this very interesting discussion is that in my experience, also in the Damanhurian history, the division, the limit between spirituality and religion is very thin, and it's also very easy to float from one side to the other, because I think that eventually the only one that can choose if he's following a spiritual path or is only applying and religion's roles is the person, is every one of us. Despite of every role or every model we have in front of us, the Damanhurian school or another magical school. For example, I met some priests, some person in the Catholic Church, that they were more moved, they're more, from the point of spirituality and spiritual path and not religions, because they were not strongly focused on dogmas. Also talking about dogmas, I think that in the spiritual path, in a perfect world, in the spiritual path, the people are focused on paradigms, but not dogmas. Because the dogma is a very clear limit. It's a square that said there is something outside and something inside. Outside is wrong, inside is good. If you have a paradigm, you can move, and the paradigm is with you, and you have no limits. You have roles, you have a direction, but there is not a border, there is not a curtains. I think that it's something we constantly choose inside of us. Sometimes in Damanhur, I was a religious because I was following without, really analyzing what I was doing. And sometimes I'm a researcher, and I think that I'm a spiritual researcher in a spiritual path because I'm looking and who I am. I'm aware about my actions, and in that case, I'm more focused on a paradigm and not a dogma.
Thank you, Nyomo. And
someone is asking what is the Falco view about spirituality in the chat.
Yes.
There you go. That's your specialization. You go, Nyomo. You'll have the answer better than all of us.
Falco was, first of all, in 40 years, almost 40 years, Falco bring to us many different point of view about spirituality, but maybe one that Falco was repeating again and again, and we know why, because we had some very practical goal to achieve in our life here. For example, the creation of the temples of humankind, the creation of the community, the creation of a hotspot on the planet that help everyone on the planet to understand that to do spirituality together is possible. So he was repeating many times that spirituality is connected to the practical aspect of to do something, to express our free will, and to put in actions our ideas and dreams. So it was a very practical point of view about spirituality. So free will, express your own free will. Of course, to say express your own free will means that you, first of all, you have to do a research inside of you to understand the division between your real needs, your real dreams, and what is something that is suggested by outside of you. This is the way to understand what means to express your own free will. Sometimes we believe we are acting, but we are only following suggestions, pushing of everything outside of us. So, in a nutshell, the Falco version of spirituality was to do a spiritual research and to express your own free will in order to do something that can be visible for the other people around of you, something that the other people can touch, so it's not something that only happens inside of you.
Tigre, do you want to add something, or?
No, I'm actually thinking, it's funny, as Nyomo talks, this is what I love about having, conversations with Nyomo, and Nyomo and I used to teach together. So it's really fun to kind of be back in this environment. And I was just thinking, as I hear him oftentimes, because of the way that he describes Falco, I can imagine those moments. And it just brings me back to memories of, walking down a hallway with Falco, having a conversation about something, and the way that he approaches everything, which was, I think, where, each one of us has our own way of touching into our spirituality. Some are very analytical with it. Some are very, emotional with it. Some kind of expect a feeling versus, how I'm feeling. And Falco was just really about, what are you doing? Like, your spirituality is expressed through what are you doing? Like, how, and I remember one time we were in a Friday serata, and he made a comment that I will never forget, because he was saying how it was talking about ideas and like impact, and saying that, kind of, I'm gonna paraphrase him badly, but it was more along the lines of like, your ideas, an idea in your head isn't good for anybody. Like, if it just swirls around in your mind, you have to bring it out through your actions. And I would say that was probably like the metaphor of his spirituality is are you acting and are you doing things that match what it is that you want to put out into the world, because that then is going to reflect back on who you are in the world. Kind of like Gandhi said, happiness is when what you think and what you feel and what you do are in harmony. And I feel like that's also, you could say spirituality is that, when what you act, what you think, what you feel, and what you do are in harmony with one another. That is really the core of it.
Thank you, Tigrila. And starting from this point of view, can you give us some examples of which one you consider your best achievements in your spiritual life as a spiritual manifestation, or what you're doing?
I'm trying to think of how you would even answer that.
So that's a curiosity.
I'm going to give you my answer. You want to know what my biggest spiritual achievement is? Peace of mind. Serenity and peace of mind. I know it sounds ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like, that really has been the culmination. I realized that the more, it's kind of like what I was just saying with the Gandhi quote, and even with Falco's quote, it's that augmentation of that ever more complexity without complication, from a spiritual physics perspective, right? Where I can do so many different things, and yet I feel spaciousness of time. I feel calm. I feel like I'm on my path. I feel like for me, that has been probably the most important spiritual achievement, is reaching a place where I realized that I was getting up early in the morning. I was going to bed late at night, but I felt peaceful throughout the course of my day. I felt like, that doesn't mean that it's 24/7 always, although we're trying to get there. But I'm just saying, like, those moments where you realize that, at least for me, especially with the way that my mind works, I'm somebody who just is very, very active, and I love doing things and creating and expressing, and more importantly, I love seeing the transformations and the evolutions that happen with people. And so I'm very hands-on in everything I do. People are afraid to ask me onto projects because I usually give 150%. Like, it's just the way I am. And yet, over the years, I've become like, there's less expectations from others on those things. There's a flow. I was just recently interviewed for a PBS documentary that's going to come out at the end of the year. And we were having this very deep conversation about that flow, that feeling like if you really sit back and surrender into your true essence, like to your divine soul, all the way back to all the connections, the path that you're supposed to be on sort of unfolds in front of you, even if you can't always articulate it. And to me, that is the accomplishment. Like, that's been probably, and there's still more to come, but that's holding that for longer stretches of time, where feeling like my day is that way, or where I'm really feeling that trust and that faith and that peace. So many people use different words to reach there. That universal kind of that universal love that comes, I hate using that word sometimes because it's so corny, but it's like so true. It's that place where you just, in Kabbalah, we think about it as like Tiferet, the beauty. Life is beautiful because you do the right thing, because it's the right thing to do, and you feel it. That to me has been the most important, true spirit. I mean, I could give you lots of external achievements, but that's been like the thing that really has transformed who I am. And it's transformed me a lot because I consider myself, I always say that if I write a book, the first line is going to be, I'm the most positive, negative person you've ever met, because my mind thinks in negatives and I was a big pain. And so to be able to be somebody that feels like she can contribute in a group, that can be an individual and be interrelated and be really at peace with who I am and how I express myself, heaven. Heaven, heaven.
Yamo, do you want to add something to
yes, for
Mary,
me,
your achievement?
for me is the moment where the fear stops, and that's my goal. Every time in my life when I really stop to have fear, and the fear is replaced with consciousness, I feel that I had a jump. I found a way to jump to another level.
Yes.
To be honest, I have to deal in this life with fear always, and this is my meter. That's the signal that I have to do a step. I have to work to jump to a new level. We always have to learn and to reach new levels. For example, I remember the very first moment in my life. It was a natural astral travel. I had an astral travel. I was very young. I had, I don't know, 40 degrees of fear. It was with flu. And so because of that, I had an astral travel. And looking at my body down to the bed, I understood for the very first moment in my life that I was not my body, and it completely changed my vision. And I felt there was not fear in this consciousness, because I'm not my body, I'm something else. Only to remember one of the moments where I felt this sort of jump. So this is my deal in my life, my challenge. Sorry.
No, we are really in a flow, because the next question is about the challenges and the difficulties that we can.
This is fine. Yeah.
In a spiritual path. So you already answered.
I answered. But also Tigrila, also Tigrila in some way also answered to this question. Right.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the fears. I mean, I still think that the number one thing that holds humanity back, and I think that when we think about what is the common element that we all as human beings feel and experience, is that fear. And it's like every time if you go, I always say that when you act like when you go with like a little child, and when somebody says, I don't know, this is my limiting belief, or I don't want to do something or something like that. And you just keep asking the word why, like why? And then they say, oh, because of this. And then why? And why? Eventually you get down to fear. That's just the foundational base of what we're here. And the only thing I feel like really works through the fear is that trust, is getting to that opposite side of unconditional love and trust, and that faith that in yourself. And so I feel like that's a big part of your spiritual path is I have a faith in myself, but that because I am a member and a part of an overall ecosystem that I trust also. And so it's like minor, like from the micro to the macro and the macro to the micro, can't speak it today. And I think that one of the difficulties in this is that as you move through this, radical honesty becomes a way of life. And like Nyomo said, it's like you have to be really honest with yourself and very transparent with yourself. And you also have to recognize that each human being and every other being, not just human beings, that you encounter is on their own path. And there might be some things that they do that they've already worked through, and there might be some things that don't work through. And I think it's very easy sometimes when we're on a spiritual path, as we start to advance through and work through certain things, for us to want to others to react the same way we're reacting. Why don't they understand that? Why don't they see that? And so I feel like that level of, that's probably one of those gotchas that when you really are on a path that's your own, you don't worry about where anybody else is. I remember when I first came to Damanhur, having somebody who was, I mean, I'm Cuban American. I grew up in a very open environment. I have many years of different practices, and there were certain things, and we see it all the time when guests come, and with initiates now all over the world. Each one of us has some things that are easier and that don't cause fears or judgments, where others have lots of them. And I remember one Damanhurian who looked at me and he's like, you have to remember, there are people here in Damanhur that the very fact that they made it to Damanhur is a huge jump in their evolution, because they come from small towns where they had to give up, they had to fight the norms and the belief systems, maybe come out of their own religious beliefs, their parents' expectations. And they had to take a huge leap of faith to come to Damanhur, especially in the early years, like when Nyomo came, where by the time I came, the temples of humankind existed. Falco already had a spirituality and a rituality that was pretty well known and understood. There was all these elements that existed, where for other people, they came here on a complete leap of faith. Like, that this is going to change and transform your life. And I think it's important for us to remember that every person is in this incarnation of life to have a journey and an experience. And I can't judge or experience anybody else's. And I can learn from them. Even the most rudimentary changes could have a humongous impact if I allow myself to see this person not for the exact thing that they did, but the fact that they did it, and the what they had to experience in order to do it. And I think that that's the beauty of living in community, is that we have these mirrors of one another, and we can feel the triggers of our personalities so much. And if we, instead of trying to project that onto another person, instead take it in and say, how do I learn from that? Or how do I contribute to making that better? What is inside of me that can create the right field or the right physical action or the right experience. Or right is the bad word, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say, is how do I contribute positively to this ecosystem, no matter where everybody is, because we're all in it together. And I think that shift is a big challenge on your spirituality. Like, a spiritual path means allowing others to touch me, allowing others' experiences to actually have an impact on me and to grow and evolve from it. And I think that can be extremely challenging. And along with the idea of, when am I supposed to act like consciously and move the synchronicity, and when am I supposed to allow the synchronicity to guide me? I think that becomes another big challenge on this path. So you really have to know thyself. That is why that's like the tenet of every spiritual path, is like, you really have to know yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tigrila. We got a message that is very connected to the present moment, and it's what should I think about spirituality in a world at war?
It's a good one.
But yeah, first of all, I think we have to remember that we are at war from thousands of years, because of course in the last 5 years we start to experience a war in Europe, or close to Europe, but there are many other conflicts all around the world from decades. So we are constantly at war, because human being is not yet arrived to really understand what means human being and spirituality, because we are still putting actions on conflicts instead of found solutions and found a way to connect. It's a completely different point of view. The point of view of people that are searching for create connections, and the point of view of people that are searching for conflicts, for diversity in terms of something that can divide me against you, instead of something that can distinguish me and you. I know this is completely a philosophic answer. In the other hand, I think that following the last words of Tigrila, working to create communities is a very practical way to create examples of solutions of the world, to produce solutions and to show the solutions to the people of the world, in order to, to touch more people we can, with the idea to create communities, because in this way we will take space that now is completely covered by the governments all around the world, taking space and helping people to understand they can create communities, and inside the communities create a new balance, a new system that where can find solutions and not to create conflict. So we've chosen to practically apply in our daily life a solution that can be an example, like many other groups all around the world are doing the same, creating communities as a solution for the problems of the world.
Yeah, and I think that's also one of the other beautiful things about being a Damanhurian, no matter where you live, is that we approach these types of situations and from many different angles. There's the physical angle, and then there's the things that you can do on the subtle planes, and then there's all these other aspects, and then there's the individual. I think the challenge that many of us have, I work with many different people who often tell me that they feel very disconnected, for example, from their own lives and from their own bodies, from all these different aspects. And I feel like this is the macro, that's the part that reflects out to many of these conflicts. many of these conflicts, as Nyomo said, have always existed. And one side of it is the fact that now we're seeing them. And I think that there is a humongous benefit that we should look at of the fact that so much of what was veiled and hidden is now unveiled and visible. Because when it's visible, it's when we can all start to move and take action towards it. And I also think it's important for us to remember that all of these systems and governments and organizations, whether you're talking about climate or you're talking about war, or you're talking about all this, are still made up of individuals. And these individuals, kind of like these entities, have been created at an energetic level from what is being put into these groups. But it's what the individuals are putting into these groups. And I think that this is the aspects of where you have to ask yourself the question of how long, like, what is the individual action that I shall take? You might act on a global level, you might act on a community level, right? But it's kind of like we were talking about earlier with Falco. Falco always said it's important, like, you have to act in some way. And your actions have ripple effects. They make impacts. They leave a trace. And so I think that your spiritual path is more important than ever right now, to ask yourself honestly, okay, I'm incarnated in this period where all of this is going on, where it's so visible, it's in your face every day, it's in the news, it's in the conversations I'm having with my friends, it's in this. So it's being mirrored to me all the time. What am I going to do? What is my role in it? Because if I don't think that I have a role in it, then I'm probably I'm going to feel like I'm part of the problem. It's like I'm going to feel the weight of it, as opposed to if you are doing even a little thing, it could just be a conversation. It could be the work that you're doing for yourself. Overall, it will snowball. It will affect greater. It will ripple out and it will have its effect. Damanhur itself is a great example of that, right? One small little group of people who we started to have these meetings and then decided they were going to live together. And then all of a sudden, more people felt that call. And now we affect so many different people, but also government structures. And we are so active in so many different realms. And the Damanhurians themselves, all Damanhurians around the world, are also active members of their existing, circles. And that's a fact. And like Nyomo said, there's more and more communities coming online. So I think it's if we think of ourselves as a ripple and we start to really ask ourselves the question of, what is my role? And my role might just be, I need to work through my trauma, or I need to become whatever. It could be that. Nobody's saying you have to go stand on the front lines of like a protest, but you have to feel that, you have to deep down feel that that is contributing in some way, in whatever way it might ripple out, even in ways you might not understand. But if you feel like it's really contributing, then that's what it is. And that's why your spirituality is more important than ever right now. I think also, I'm going to add one little piece, because I recently did a podcast episode on this that was like, why I don't have, especially as a person who's very connected to nature, why I don't have eco-anxiety. And I do think that also understanding the overall, Nyomo will correct my words here, but the overall game of life at play by the primeval divinities, by what is happening at an overall level, as a cosmological level, I think also helps you understand that evolution and greater complexity doesn't always come with kumbaya and, ooh, look how pretty everything is. Not always. Even in nature, competition or predation or parasitism are important factors. They're not primary. Mutualisms are definitely the best, like mutually beneficial relationships. But competition and predation and parasitism has a role, an important role. And so don't discard it just because it looks ugly to you. Doesn't always mean that all of it, like, there is a greater game at play. And what's most important is for you to understand that game so that you can be an active player in the direction that it needs to go.
Yeah. I was going to describe something very, very similar to Tigrilla, because we faced a pandemic, and after that, a war. Now, two different wars close to Europe. And from our point of view, looking at the planet, we are in front of a very big shift. And every time human being faced a very big shift, it was a challenge, was not something usually very happy to experience. Like, we are now facing the crisis because we are changing completely the skin. We don't yet understood what will be the new skin, but we know for sure that the past is completely gone. We are now completely shifting to a new world, and we believe that the work of Damanhur and all the other communities all around the world that are working to create a system that they can sustain themselves, it's very important to offer to this new world new solutions. Something that is not yet tried in order to found something new. We cannot constantly apply all the solutions because they are not working anymore. So we believe that now is the moment of change. Looking at the history of the planet, pandemics and war are the only real aspect that really changed the world. Luckily, because we are not yet so evolved in order to understand that we can change also because of the happiness. We have to pass through this crisis. I'm not saying that I love war and I love the pandemic and all the effect of it, but we have to deal with that aspect, and we are working every day because of that. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that's so important for us to also get into. I just want to say one thing about that. And I think that this is exactly how we weave through why spirituality is such an important aspect, as opposed to maybe some forms of religion, because religions hold the status quo, right? Religions, because they have structures, because they have these ways, they're made on purpose to hold, to contain something, and to not necessarily evolve and change. Little slight changes here and there. A spiritual system is much more active. A spiritual path is about constant change, about constant stabilization and destabilization in order to be able to grow. Stabilize what you've had. Yeah, exactly. And that's really what we want to push. I mean, that's even the whole path of the Quiziti and everything. It's like really about that constant, I take action, I move stuff, then I stabilize. Then I look at what came out of that, and then I see what direction to go. And then I destabilize again, and I flip the paradigm, and I play with it. And that's, if we're going to find new models, that's the only way to do it. Because if you stay within what you've always done, you will always get what you got, right? So you need to play outside of that realm. And that's where multiple intelligences come in. That's where, plant intelligence and nature spirits come in. This is where divinities have at play. Like, there's so many elements in our cosmology that allow us, and human beings are very stuck in our own way of thinking. We think we're clever. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to quiet, as they say in biomimicry, quiet that cleverness and allow yourself to use your spiritual ecosystem and your own divine like who you are from at a soul level, and to connect into other kinds of beings and other human beings as well. So, humans as well as other kin, and then shift to allow new parts. And I think this is why art is such a huge part of the Damanhurian culture as well, because in the world of art, as well as in the world of dreams and astral travels, those rules that we have for what life looks like can be completely shifted, and they don't exist. And therefore you can create, and you can start to get visions of what the next paradigm will look like. And so we need more safe spaces like this, like what Damanhur's doing, what other communities are, online communities, like in-person communities. We need safe spaces to shift out of these paradigms, to say the things that seem weird and woo, to explore take all of this knowledge we have and take the rules away while keeping the knowledge, and then see what happens if we start putting it into. And this is why the Damanhurian spirituality is so focused on research groups and on experimentation, in order to give us those safe spaces to shift out of those paradigms. Because again, that's what the world is calling us to do.
Yes.
Thank you. We are at the end of our appointment. Today, speaking about spirituality, we touched so many topics: action, connection, understanding, mission, even war. So thank you for having been with us. And
thank you too. And thank you very much for the questions.
Yes, thank you so much. They're great.
And you can find these and all the other episodes on Damanhur.community, where you can find also more information about Damanhur, our mission, and you can share and with the other participants. So thank you very much, and see you for the next one.
Convoy, everyone. Convoy.
Convoy.